All right, we're talking about New Orleans, specifically Tulane and Carrollton, unpacking Mid-City's busiest corner. And we'll make the case for that because I'm sure a lot of you are going, oh, that can't be right. But we'll explain it a little bit as we go here. My name is Edward Brandley. I am your NOLA history guy at NOLA History Guy on all the social medias and all that kind of stuff. A word from your sponsor. Please consider supporting NOLA History Guy on Patreon. We have been on Patreon for some time, but we've expanded the opportunities that we are offering you to support the pod and support the work here. Specifically, we now have two monthly tiers of support on Patreon. We've got the $1 tier, which gives you extra blog posts every month. Plus, you get to feel real good about supporting local history and that kind of stuff. We also now have a $5 monthly tier. Um, that gives you additional blog posts, additional stories that we're going to tell you every month. Plus, we're doing a second weekly podcast. Now, of course, the primary pod, what you're listening to here, is always going to be open and free and on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and every. It's available in all the usual suspects. But the $5 pod is going to be an additional premium for supporters of the work at that level. Are we being cheeky asking you for $5 a month? Not on your life. I've seen what some of you guys pay $5 a month for on Substack, and with the exception of really smart people like my friend Bob Mann from LSU, uh, yeah, we got game, right? So it's like, please consider supporting us, and help make this happen and get us a boost financially as we go along. How does it all work? Well, you go to Patreon. So it's Patreon, Patreon. You see it there on the at the bottom of the image. Patreon.com, NOLA History Guy, all one word. You sign up, make a Patreon account, and then you sign up for NOLA History Guy at either the $1 or the $5 level, and you get the benefits based on which level you sign up for. You get a 7-day free trial. You don't like what you see because we've got premium pods in the can now that you can look at. We've got premium blog entries that you can see. That way you can get an idea of what this is all about. You don't like it, go ahead and cancel it. No harm, no foul. If you like what you see and you started at the $1 level, you want to upgrade to the $5 level, that's great. We actually put out the show pages for the premium pods on all the usual suspects in social media and of course on the website, so you'll be able to see it. Well, you just got to pony up to hear it, to actually do it. The premium pods are what I like to call old school unpacks. Where we take a photo and we deep dive it, or we take a location and deep dive it a little bit in just kind of just the old way of doing things, where we just talk about something. The primary pod, obviously we've moved into the YouTube era and everything else. That's why we've got the video here, that kind of thing. But the old school pod is the premium benefit, kind of getting into just that talk about New Orleans that we've always done and always loved to do. In addition to supporting NOLA History Guy on Patreon, of course, you can buy our books, and that's Brothers of Sacred Heart in New Orleans. That covers Brother Martin High School back to Coriezu and St. Aloysius, its predecessor schools, going back to the 1860s. New Orleans, the Canal Streetcar Line, my first book for Arcadia, which is the history of the Canal Streetcar from 1861 to when we lost it in 1964. And then it came back again in 2004. Maison Blanche Department Store, Mr. Bingle is Chapter 3. New Orleans Jazz basically is a survey. There's no music in the book, but we tell you a lot of stories about the old cats who got jazz started, going back to proto jazz, to King Bolden, Pops as a youngster, that kind of thing, all the way up to the modern guys. Legendary Locals of New Orleans is kind of like a who's who of a whole bunch of people in the 300 plus year history of New Orleans. Was talking about Mel Ott the other day and how he is a legendary local of New Orleans. The other retail book, of course, is Krause, the New Orleans Value Store for the History Press. Uh, the History Press contacted me after seeing the Maison Blanche book and said, would I be interested? I was like, heck yes, I'd be interested. Took what I knew about Canal Street from the first two books and expanded on that and learned so much about so much more about Canal Street retail, our Jewish community and Jewish retailing on Canal Street. Such a fun project to do. Thanks for your time on that. We appreciate you supporting the pod. Let's get to work. Let's talk about New Orleans, and specifically here, of course, we're going to talk about Tulane and Carrollton. Here's our tour guide talking points. Shout out to my compatriots in the street walking work for Friends of the Cabildo and our French Quarter walking tours. Best thing out there. Of course, we'll put the link to that on the show page. We're going to talk about mid city growth and how it gets started. Basically, mid city, and we're going to have to break this down one time, for a full geographic explanation of this. Mid City didn't start out as what you think. Mid City was actually a quite narrow corridor between the new canal as it turns toward the lake, and then on the western side, and then the Southern Railway tracks and yard on the St. Louis Street side, kind of following it's now the Lafitte corridor, right? It's what was the Carondelet Canal to the Bayou, and the railroad kind of blocked in the neighborhood at that point. And that's what made the corner of Tulane and Carrollton such an important access point for the neighborhood, because it connected uptown coming from South Carrollton Avenue over crossing the new canal into Mid City, and then Tulane Avenue coming from downtown, because Tulane Avenue is for all intents and purposes is an extension of Common Street. So you've got Common Street in the CBD, and then you get to O'Keefe and Rampart, and it morphs into Tulane Avenue from there, going up to the corner of Tulane and Carrollton, that becomes the big connector for Mid City. We'll talk about why a big section of that was dubbed the Miracle Mile in the 1950s. Trains, streetcars, and automobiles. The reason that Tulane and Carrollton was a busy intersection, a busy corner, was because not only did it offer this connection to other neighborhoods, and it featured a good bit of retail on the corner, but it also brought the streetcar lines together, the Tulane and St. Charles Belt lines originally, trains, because there was the Carrollton Depot that was a stop on the way out of town, and then of course automobiles, because once you crossed over the train tracks, you were heading out Airline Highway US 61 into Metairie and points north and west. Baseball. Tulane and Carrollton, this corner, that's the corner of Pelican Park, home of the New Orleans baseball Pelicans, long before Benson got the idea to name his basketball team the Pelicans. Of course, it was our minor league baseball team for decades. And of course, this corner is truly the gateway to Metairie. This is even before the Pontchartrain Expressway, which then morphs into I-10 when the interstate project develops under Eisenhower's presidency. This was your way out of town, or your way into town for that matter. You're driving from Baton Rouge to New Orleans. You came in on Airline Highway. You got to Tulane and Carrollton and went up Tulane into town. You're going out to, driving to Baton Rouge to Lafayette, wherever you were heading. You were going west out of town. You left to the corner. You hit that green light at Tulane and Carrollton, and off you were going out US 61, which was going to put you to Baton Rouge, and then it was going to put you further west, out to Houston, wherever you were off to at that point. So let's look at the corner. Let's have an idea. Let's get some perspective on what we're talking about here. So I'm calling this an intersection unpack. Usually we take a single photo and break it down, but we're now taking a corner. We're taking an intersection and breaking it down. So we're going to start after World War II here because that's kind of the big deal. The Tulane and Carrollton belt, the streetcars that ran in this area had been in service for a long time. The date on this photo you can see there is January 8th, 1947. We're in the final years of belt service on the Tulane and Carrollton belts because after World War II, New Orleans Public Service Incorporated, well, NOPSI had been looking to get rid of streetcars for decades, but the War Department would not let them convert to buses just before and during World War II, mainly because buses consume gasoline in some cases, diesel fuel in most cases, used rubber tires, and rubber was essential for vehicles for the war effort. The streetcars, NOPSI may have not liked the way that they ran it and the way the city wanted them to run them, but they certainly weren't expensive when compared to having to replace buses every 5 to 7 years and swapping out tires and everything else. That changes after World War II, but for this particular photo, this is a shot of Carrollton Avenue and Tulane. So the photographer is standing on Tulane Avenue at the end of what Morrison later dubs the Miracle Mile. So you're looking west on Tulane Avenue. To the photographer's left, where that car is, that's Pelican Stadium. To the right is a gas station that was there for a bajillion years. We're into the intersection at that point. You can see what happens here is that the streetcars, you can see the tracks there, the streetcars make a big turn here because we're hitting the end of we're hitting the city line, we're hitting the parish line when you cross over, basically when you cross over that that overpass and you go for about a quarter mile and you're in Metairie, you're in Jefferson Parish at that point. So this is the big turn for the belt lines, for the Tulane belt and for the St. Charles belt service. And what we mean by that is what we're talking about here is we are if we start on the left-hand side, that's going to be the outbound track that's turning now inbound to head back into town. So the St. Charles line left St. Charles and Canal, went up St. Charles to the river bend, to the beginning of South Carrollton Avenue, made the right turn, and it has cruised at this point all the way up St. Charles Avenue South Carrollton Avenue to here at the at Carrollton and Tulane. Then what it does, the St. Charles line then makes a right turn onto that left-hand track. So if the streetcar was coming, it would be coming right at us on the left-hand side track on the side where Pelican Stadium was. The streetcar then goes down Tulane Avenue into downtown, curves and makes its way back at Elk Place to Canal Street, goes back to Canal and St. Charles and starts the whole thing again. Riding the belt meant all you did was circle around that way. The brilliant writer Earl Higgins in his book, The Joy of Yat Catholicism, which is a fantastic book, he's got a whole chapter about riding the belt because as a Loyola student, you could pay, back in his day, you could pay 7 cents to ride the streetcar, and never get off because it never ended. So there was no end to the line. The two-lane line went in the opposite direction. So as the St. Charles line route cars were coming at the photographer, the two-lane car was coming from behind the photographer on the right-hand track. It made a left turn here at Carrollton Avenue, and it went all the way down South Carrollton Avenue back to the river bend. It gets to St. Charles Avenue. It makes the turn, it makes the left hand turn, and it goes inbound on St. Charles. It goes down St. Charles Avenue to Canal Street. It would then go from St. Charles. It would go then make a turn onto Canal Street. It would circle around the Cop Killer Monument at Liberty Place and then start back on the outbound route where it would go back to Elk Place, turn, connect onto Tulane Avenue, and come basically westbound or outbound on Tulane Avenue. So this was still in place at the time of this photo, and you can see the streetcars, the crossing there in case there was a problem. You needed to switch back, shift back, or whatever, just very frequent across the different streetcar routes. The scenery here, as we said, to the left out of frame is is Pelican Stadium. The On the left there, where you see that big Pepsi Cola billboard, that's now a garage and a collision center. It was a Ford Motor Company service center for years. It's always been something automobile, even going back at this point. On the right hand side, you see that it's a cabinet manufacturer on the corner there, or just off the corner. And then just to the right of that, out of frame a little bit, is the beginnings of a strip mall that had an H.G. Hill grocery store and a couple of other things that we're going to talk about as we now advance over the years. So this is what Tulane and Carrollton looks like right after, or well, pretty much during World War II, and then now in the immediate years after World War II. By the way, all those notes on this photo, this is a Nopsy photo. Basically, this is a Frank Studios photo, courtesy of the Historic New Orleans collection, that is basically Frank Studios were the photographers for a lot of law firms. They were, in particular, public service. If there was a wreck or an issue or something that the lawyers needed some kind of documentation, they would call Frank Studios, who would dispatch a photographer to the location. Bus wreck, streetcar accident, whatever the case may be, they would go out and shoot everything. That number is going to be a docket number for a case, so you can kind of see that maybe there was a streetcar involved accident here, and so they dispatched the photographer to set the scene so you could see what it looked like when the case came to court. By the 1950s, Delisep's Story Morrison, Shep Morrison, there he's the guy, not the bald-headed guy holding he's the receding hairline in the center of the photo, in the dark suit. That's Mayor Shep Morrison. Got the nickname Chef because his name was Delisep's, and well, you get the idea. Uh, so Shep was mayor at the time and was a very much a proponent and an advocate of modernization and advancement of the city of New Orleans. He's coming in after he becomes mayor in the late 40s, after World War II, into the 1950s. Basically, he's mayor almost entirely through the 1950s. He's mayor until 1964, when he takes an ambassadorial appointment to the Organization of American States from President Kennedy. Shep, like I say, he's a big believer in modernization, and the wrecking ball was one of his favorite friends and that kind of thing. But in this case, he's pitched by the business community and agrees with the business community that Tulane Avenue becomes an important, or is considered now, an important connector to the rest of this, basically from Orleans, Jefferson Parish into Orleans, further out because of Airline Highway, US 61, Baton Rouge, and then points north and west. You'll see the sketch here that they're dedicating the Miracle Mile because what's happening here is, of course, they're closing down streetcar service on Tulane. The decision, the plan for NOPSI was to convert the Tulane line to bus service and cut back the St. Charles line to its existing terminus at South Carrollton and South Claiborne Avenues. So at South Carrollton and South Claiborne, instead of the two-lane streetcar, instead of the belts continuing on South Carrollton, the streetcar ends there, and then the two-lane bus service begins there at Claiborne and Carrollton. The buses would then go up two-lane, well, excuse me, up South Carrollton. Then when you got to the intersection of Tulane and Carrollton, that began the Miracle Mile. Now, by not having streetcars, Morrison and the city were able to cut back the neutral ground on Tulane Avenue. So what we see here is what we see here is Tulane Avenue now with an extra lane and a half available for automobiles because the streetcar neutral ground has been cut to nothing. If you've ever been driving on Tulane Avenue, this is why almost every blessed street, every blessed intersection from where that illustration begins all the way down to like Rampart Street are no left turns because it would block up the traffic. You'd have to wait. There were specific turns, specific intersections where you had left turn lanes cut into the neutral ground. But otherwise, it's still to this day all no left turns, that kind of thing. So that's what happens is that the streetcar is discontinued, bus service kicks in, and so the corner of Tulane and Carrollton becomes the beginning of the Miracle Mile. It's where you're coming in, you come over that overpass, over the train tracks from Metairie into heading towards downtown now. One of the most attractive things about the corner of Tulane and Carrollton from the average New Orleanian or the average Jeffersonian, the average Metairie person was the retail on the corner. You had that Ford garage on one side, and over here you have a strip mall that was, well, initially you had, well, of course, you've got the Walgreens on the corner. Then you've got, well, that's the MB, but before the MB, that middle section was an HG Hill supermarket. And then you've got the two-story section that was retail on the bottom and then the bowling alley on the top. So let's break this down a little bit quickly. The drugstore on the corner, Walgreens. Behind it, you'll see that is where that cabinet factory was, which you'll see those basically that's been demolished and other buildings to replace it are behind it. So the drugstore on the actual corner, off frame right there, that's the overpass that takes you across the train tracks and heading out Airline Highway into Metairie. The grocery store closes down, relocates. Maison Blanche department store on Carrollton, on Canal at 901 Canal and Dauphine. They make the decision in 1947. We're ready to expand to more than one store, more than just our store on Canal Street. So they decide they're going to open two stores, one here on Carrollton Avenue in Mid-City, and another store in Gentilly on Gentilly Boulevard and Frenchman Street just off of Elysian Fields. They opened both stores in 1948. Technically, the Carrollton store here opens first, so it's the second store, if you will, by a few weeks. So this is the first store off of 901 Canal for MB, and it was a big deal because you could shop at MB downtown. You could see something in the paper in an ad for MB. You could call downtown and say, I'd like to try that dress. Could you send it to Carrollton for me? So if you lived over on Bank Street or you lived over on Bienville Street, you didn't have to go all the way into town now. The MB delivery system would take the item you want, put it on a truck, bring it over here to the suburban store, and then you could make your decision, buy it, not buy it, whatever here. And of course, you had a good bit of stock here. This is a two-story store. This was a good-sized suburban extension of the big five-story store on Canal Street. I say five-story, by the way. You know, the building that's now the Ritz Hotel is actually 13 stories high, but the retail was only the first five. The second eight in the front and all 13 stories. Well, actually, no. It's actually the retail went back into the second half too. So it's the higher eight stories were the office building and all of that. So this is a big deal. It's an expansion, post-war. We're getting excited about expanding into Mid-City. Again, Mid-City had become quite the neighborhood even before World War II because of the Sicilians. Essentially, we have this huge Sicilian immigration expansion in the 1880s and 1890s going into the 20th century. By 1915, the Sicilians are filling up. They've filled up the French Quarter. They've moved into Faubourg Treme, and Faubourg Treme is all but completely Sicilian at this point. And then basically the Sicilians start moving toward the lake and they're following that corridor from the new canal to the railroad, which is now the Lafitte Greenway, the Southern Railway connectivity that came up Basin Street to Terminal Station there at Canal and Basin. So that's always been residential. You had Treme, and then moving the beginnings of Mid City in moving into going approaching Broad Street. Then when you cross Broad, you're heading toward the lake in this area. It's when it starts building out, and so it's truly becoming a Sicilian neighborhood to the point where in 1915 the Sicilians asked if they could move St. Anthony of Padua Parish from the old mortuary chapel from the old which now Our Lady of Guadalupe Church on Rampart Street. That used to be St. Anthony of Padua. It was basically the big neighborhood church supporting Treme and the upper part of Mid City. They asked, can we build a new church? They build the church on Canal and South St. Patrick. That becomes the current St. Anthony parish. And so basically from the church up to Carrollton Avenue, it's filling up with Sicilians. And then, of course, other folks as, just the Sicilians are marrying into the community, just like every other melting pot part of the gumbo that is New Orleans. And so this basically the corner of Carrollton and Tulane, because of the streetcar and the connection into the rest of the neighborhood, becomes a retail point. You could hit the drugstore here. You have MB after World War II, and you've got the bowling alley. And the bowling alley, of course, was Mid-City Lanes is a big deal. You may know Mid-City Lanes now from Blanchard and his Rock and Bowl. He acquired Mid-City Lanes in the 1990s, and that's when he decided that a bowling alley should have music and should have concerts, and that's when Mid-City Lanes became Rock and Bowl. He decided to build his own bowling alley further down on South Carrollton at Earhart. And so Mid-City Lanes closed at that point. It's now a bar room called the Shamrock upstairs. But all the time I was growing up, yeah, it was a bowling alley, and you could go over there and have pass the time as just coming in and good old family fun, as we can say, as we you saw. So of course this is a big connector to this corner is a big connector to Jefferson Parish. So you can see the big clock with the Regal Beer sign, the Regal Beer ad on top of the drugstore. Yeah, stop in, get your beer on your way home. Get your six pack to bring home as you're heading back to the Metries. Here's a little bit of a wider shot of the corner shot from Pelican Stadium. So you're kind of up on a ramp at Pelican Stadium at this point. MB Maison Blanche, of course, as we said, that store is MB Carrollton is the first suburban store. It opens just before the Gentilly store in 1948, and you can see this is the beginning of the Miracle Mile. Now, if you remember that uh, um, photo from 1947. This photo is now from 1952. And you can see the streetcars are gone and the neutral ground has been cut back so that the streetcar tracks are non existent. And now you've got that extra lane of automobile traffic to facilitate crossing over the overpass and heading out to the suburbs. You can see the Walgreens is still there, the Regal beer sign is still there, the bowling alley, and the MB. As time goes on, suburban expansion begins. White flight starts happening. People are moving out to the suburbs. You know what the big thing there, of course, is a combination of white flight, inexpensive lots out in Metairie. You could buy a lot, build your own house, as opposed to having to, you know, you're living. Yeah, it's the same thing whether you were in the Ninth Ward, moving, from, you're coming back from the war, and you had Ninth Ward families that the young men who were coming back from the war didn't want to live with mama and dad all the time, so they would go to Gentilly and go that direction. Folks who lived in Mid City, particularly the Sicilian families, would cross over into Airline Highway and go out and move to Jefferson Parish. As they did, Maison Blanche as a chain, as a department store, they were no dummies. They went out as far as the Airline Drive-In down Airline Highway into Metairie and built a new store, new two-story store in Airline Village Shopping Center there. I guess it's about a quarter mile before you hit not Navarre, I'm sorry, Lebar Road there on Airline Highway just before Causeway Boulevard. When they open the airline store, that becomes the quote main store for Metairie and then for Mid City because it was in relatively easy shot now. You could bypass the busy corner, was no longer going to be busy from a retail standpoint, but still from a traffic standpoint, Tulane and Carrollton still to this day can be a traffic zoo. You see what's happened to the MB Carrollton. The sign on top, Maison Blanche Carrollton, is still there, but you'll see in the middle now that MB Carrollton has become a budget store. And a budget store in the MB terminology was sort of the modern equivalent of an outlet store in an outlet mall. Like, the outlet mall in Gonzales has a Brooks Brothers outlet, a Nike outlet, and that kind of thing. The budget stores were that for MB. You had a return that you couldn't, somebody bought a dress, tried it on, got it home, looked at themselves in the mirror, tried it with different shoes, and no, it's not going to work. So they bring it back. Well, what do? The buyers then put all of that together as budget goods, as discount goods. It's not new like thrift shop, old and worn, but you sold it, you couldn't sell it as new again, so you put it in the budget store. Stuff last year's clothing lines, that kind of thing, would go to the budget store. Appliances that the companies came out with new models and you brought them out to the budget store. So the budget annex downtown, the building right behind the store at Bienville and Iberville, I'm sorry, not Dauphine and Iberville, directly behind the 901 Canal, the main store, that was the budget annex. MB's main store here moves down Airline Highway. The Carrollton store becomes the budget store. In Gentilly, the original Gentilly store at Gentilly Boulevard and Frenchman moves to Gentillywood Shopping Center, which then the original MB Gentilly becomes a budget store. This store and the Gentilly store eventually close because what's happening, of course, is airline eventually closes. This photo is from 1964. Clearview Mall open, Clearview Shopping Center opens in 1969, and then the Plaza in Lake Forest opens in 1974. So of course, airline closes eventually, and then Gentilly Woods closes when the big store in the Plaza opens. The bowling alley still, well, like I say, the building's still there. The bowling alley's still the bowling alley until Blanchard moves it down the street. Take me out to the Pelicans. Uh, Baseball has been in Mid City for a long time. If you haven't heard my friend Derby Gisclair talk about baseball and the different ballparks, in particular in Mid City, we're actually working on a tag team talk where we talk about the combination of how transit determined where a lot of these ballparks were. For example, the Tulane Carrollton Belt Line made this corner the perfect place for Heineman Park, which was the original name of Pelican Stadium and the home of the New Orleans Pelicans baseball team. This is a shot from 1951 when the decision was made to cut back the two-lane line, discontinue streetcars on two-lane, and cut back St. Charles to its present terminus at South Claiborne. You can see they're getting ready to rip up the streetcar tracks. That's why all of that lumber and everything is there to rebuild cut back the neutral ground. Then obviously dig it up, pave it back, turn that grassy area on either side of the streetcar tracks into another lane for automobile traffic. The stadium had been there now for some time, of course, and they weren't overly concerned because that just meant that if you were going to a New Orleans Pelicans game or a New Orleans Black Pelicans game, you would just ride the two-lane bus down here or up here instead of riding the two-lane streetcar. Here's an aerial view of the ballpark that gives you some insight into this whole thing. You can see this is post 1951, where the neutral ground on the left hand side there on Tulane Avenue has been cut back. The ballpark, this is a beautiful ballpark. It was not only was it a great ballpark, but it was also very, very well used because it had a very unique history in the sense that while the games for the New Orleans Pelicans, the white team, were segregated, the both the Pelicans Southern Association team and the Negro League New Orleans Black Pelicans played their home games here in Pelican Stadium. So when the white team, when the Southern Association team was either off or was on an away trip, then the New Orleans Black Pelicans could play at home here in the stadium. So you got cut back Tulane Avenue on the left hand side here, and you can see the run up on the Miracle Mile now as Morrison envisioned it, coming in from the parish, coming in, from Jefferson, coming in from parts north and west. We come over and we see access road on the right hand side, on the river side of the stadium. And then you see a whole bunch of train tracks there. And those train tracks are the outbound Illinois Central tracks that are coming from in town at Union Station. Later, that becomes Union Passenger Terminal, our current Amtrak terminal, the train station for New Orleans since 1954. Little bit wider shot, different angle that you can see of the baseball of Pelican Stadium. This is post 1952 again. You can see the Miracle Mile is rolling along here. You've got that auto service center on the that's going to be the Metairie, the western riverside of the intersection in the bottom right corner. This is an aerial looking basically over the strip mall where the MB and the Walgreens is. And then you can see the gas station with, again, big billboards here on top of all of these buildings because this is the approach coming in from Metairie. So if you work downtown and you were coming in from Metairie, you were bombarded with advertising in the beginning of the Miracle Mile. Here, of course, we've got the ballpark still rolling for another few years before it's closed, before the Pelicans closed down and the stadium's demolished. And then you can see all of the railroad tracks just to the right of that. Now you go up a little bit in the frame and you see you basically see the railroad tracks there. You see some trees and there's some light industrial there. And then you see this huge strip of white. And yes, it's a black and white photo. So not everything that's white in a black and white photo is indeed actually white. But in this case, it certainly is. And specifically there, that is the remains, or that is the pathway of what had been the new canal, the New Basin Canal, since the 1840s. So in 1949, again, you didn't do this kind of thing during World War II, but after World War II, the usefulness of the new canal as a navigable waterway had not been all that great ever since the 1920s and the opening of the Inner Harbor Navigational Canal, the Industrial Canal. So the new Basin Canal just wasn't what it used to be in terms of from an industrial or business use. So the decision was made after World War II to fill in the canal. And so what we see now here by this is going to be 53, 54 or so, we see that the canal has been filled in, and the canal bed, the actual canal, has been filled in first with dirt and now paved over with concrete. And construction is beginning at this point on the Pontchartrain Expressway. I said 54. I'm wrong. This is going to be 52, 53 because they filled in the canal. And by 54, the Pontchartrain Expressway is pretty much up and rolling. So this is more like 52 or 53 at this point. But that big wide strip, that's where the new canal was. The baseball team closes down. The stadium is no longer useful. The property is sold. It's the stadium is demolished and becomes the Fontainebleau Motor Hotel. And it's that way, it's a hotel that is actually a quite popular motel. It's called a motor hotel. It is a motel and a hotel because you can see it's a multi-story building in the back that was indeed, a true hotel. But then you've got the two-story motel with retail, restaurant, coffee shop, meeting rooms and such on the bottom, and then further back into the building and upstairs, you've got hotel rooms there. You've got motel style, two-story walk-up type rooms there as well. This is a great shot again from the mid 50s. You can see the street is falling into a bit of disrepair at that point, just for the usual reasons why everything is a battle against climate and heat in New Orleans. I just love that checker cab in the middle there, right? Black quarter panels and then the yellow on the door for a checker cab, ready to take somebody who you just come in from the airport. You're staying here at the Fontainebleau. Take a taxi to go into town for meetings or whatever it was you're doing. The Fontainebleau lasted a good long time, became the Fountain Bay at one point. Then the buildings, as you see here, still exist. The downstairs, the two-story building is now called the Fontainebleau Apartments, where it's a condo development. The main hotel building had been converted into a self-storage building years ago, back in the late 80s, and it continues to be a self-storage. And then the parking lot that you see here, that's just a hot mess of disrepair, Basically, that's been built out and retooled, and it's actually a Chick-fil-A fast food place there that pushes up to the corner of Tulane and Carrollton. So we've talked about the retail, we've talked about the streetcars, the buses we'll get into in a little bit. Let's talk about the railroad for a minute. The main connector, or what ties Tulane and Carrollton, of course, it's a popular intersection because it's linking uptown with mid city. Even when the canal was still there, you had a big bridge at Tulane and Carrollton. That's how the streetcars, that's how the belt service got across. The buses, everything was that big bridge that gets filled in starting in 1949. But in addition to this being the busy street rail and public transit corridor, one of the things that public transit serviced was a depot for the railroads. And you can see it there. It's just a single train stand here. And then there's can't see it because of the train, but there was a stand on the other side of that big E-Series engine, Illinois Central engine. And that was the Carrollton Depot. Now, originally, the Carrollton Depot was set up to service the Illinois Central, the Southern Pacific, and the Kansas City Southern. Illinois Central and Southern Pacific used old Union Station on Howard Avenue as that was their home. That was their station for decades. The Kansas City Southern used well, actually, it was the other way around. It was interesting. Louisiana and Arkansas Railroad actually bought Kansas City Southern, but they adopted that brand because it was better known than they were. But so now, basically all of these westbound and northbound trains were heading out of town here on these tracks. So to facilitate, to help out, to encourage their passengers to use their trains, the railroads built a depot, basically a stop here at Carrollton Avenue. So the trains are going out. He's left Union Station. He's left the LNA station on South Rampart, if it was the Kansas City Southern train, and they would make a quick stop here at Tulane and Carrollton. The ballpark is just there out of frame on the left of this image. And so if you lived uptown, you live up on Calhoun Street, or you live in Riverbend, or in the Carrollton neighborhood, or you lived in Mid-City, you could take the bus, you could take the streetcar, you could have somebody take a taxi, drop you off here. You didn't have to go all the way into town to board the train. This train, you can see it if you look closely at the right-hand side of the engine. You'll see it says Panama Limited. The Panama Limited was the New York to Chicago, not New York, New Orleans to Chicago train. That was the highlight. It was the classy main name train for the Illinois Central Railroad. It started at Union Station, then went all the way up to Union Station in Chicago. It was a limited train, so it had limited stops, was an all Pullman train, so it was all sleeper cars, diner, club cars. It was a little more pricier ride than some of the other trains. There was coach service on Illinois Central that you could ride in the coach for the day and a half trip at a lesser price, but this was the classy train, as it was, the Panama Limited. Initially, later on in the 60s, Illinois Central takes one of the coach-based trains and gives it a name brand and calls it a train that they called the City of New Orleans, and that's where the song came from. Was they rebranded one of the coach, or less expensive, the budget trains that ran up to Chicago, renamed it the City of New Orleans. Amtrak took over the lines in 1971. They originally called the train the Panama Limited, but the song was so popular they renamed the line so that to this day it is the City of New Orleans. So here's the Panama Limited heading out, going westbound. It's going to cross here. It's going to go now. The Amtrak train takes these exact tracks. It just goes straight out west, going into Old Jefferson, heading out to Kenner, makes the turn past the airport, kind of follows it follows I-55 up to Hammond and points north, Jackson, Mississippi, Memphis, Tennessee, up into Chicago. Here's another shot of just past the depot here. What's happened is now is the train has crossed over Tulane and Carrollton. So the Panama Limited, what you're looking at is actually the back of the retail strip and then the light industrial, light commercial buildings that are behind the retail strip on the left. So we've left uh, we've left the corner of Tulane and Carrollton, and we're just past it. This is the Panama Limited again. It's heading out to Metairie from here. Metairie, Jefferson, Kenner, up, then makes that turn, crosses the lake, heads up to Chicago. You'll notice the tracks make a curve that you could flip the switch and come across and go toward the left there to that other set of tracks. After 1954, those tracks were used in particular then when Union Passenger Terminal became the only passenger station, railroad station in town. Then the other railroads that had their own stations, in particular Texas and Pacific, Missouri Pacific, as well as Southern Railway and Louisville and Nashville, those two railroads had their main passenger terminals on Canal Street. All of that gets merged into Union Passenger Terminal on Loyola. So what happens, of course, is that Southern needs to go towards the lake, and L&N needs to go north from there as well. To go out, L&N goes over out towards on the Gulf Coast to for its trains to head out, and then the Southern Railway, the Crescent and the Southerner, and all the trains that would go up across the lake to Slidell, then into Mississippi, Alabama, Atlanta, and then all the way, well, of course, in the case of the Southerner and the Crescent, went all the way up to New York. Amtrak to this day still uses that track to head out basically along, it's following at that point the new canal, the Pontchartrain Expressway is basically behind the photographer here, and those tracks followed the canal, follow now I-10 and go up to the back belt where they make a turn, and the train would go west and go out to Lake Pontchartrain. Here's another shot now. This is 1952-ish. We are seeing the Miracle Mile. The streetcars are gone. That all of that white down in the bottom is the concrete that this is the new canal filled in, and they're getting ready to begin construction on the Pontchartrain Expressway. We see the ballpark there. We see that auto service center that looks like a Quonset hut there. That building is actually a lumber mill, because of course, again, we've got incredible amount of suburban expansion going on, so that the corner of Carrollton and Tulane is still quite the busy business intersection. The retail is there still. You see the Regal beer sign has changed a little bit, but we still, we've got the Walgreens, we've got the Maison Blanche, and we've got the bowling alley there. Then the gas station and Home Plate Inn directly across the street on Tulane Avenue. Once the streetcar was discontinued and the St. Charles belt service was discontinued, the St. Charles streetcar is never discontinued, but it's cut back in terms of service. So now we see bus service on Tulane, but the buses were electric buses at this time. Trolley buses replaced the streetcars. You hear them, most people call them trolley buses. The industry would call them trackless trolleys as well, because they were electric buses. Still quite popular in a lot of places. San Francisco Muni uses electric buses extensively in downtown San Francisco to this day. So you can see that instead of the streetcar, the overhead wires are there for the streetcar, but we've ripped up the street. NOPSI has ripped up the streetcar tracks, and you can see the trolley buses going under over and going under the overpass, coming in and out. The bus on the left is going inbound down to the river. The other bus is about to approach the corner of Tulane and Carrollton, where it's going to make the right turn and head back into town. The train crossing on the underpass. The underpass has been there again for a long time. It was a WPA project before the war. Uh, you'll see that the train crossing now is not the Illinois Central, but it is a Kansas City Southern train that's coming out of at this point it's still Union Station. Oh, it's coming from LNA Station on South Rampart. So Kansas City Southern is going out this way. It's following the Illinois Central main line, where it will curve and go points north and eventually go up. And rather than going and following, going up what is now I-55, going up into Mississippi, going to Jackson and then Memphis, etc. This train, the Kansas City Southern trains, cut across the state into Shreveport, into Texarkana and Dallas, eventually hitting St. Louis and well, Kansas City, because of course that's the name of the railroad. Here's another shot of the underpass. No traffic here, but you can see the extension poles with the overhead catenary that the streetcar tracks are gone. You can see where the streetcars were, because you can still see the lines where everything was repaved, but you could still kind of see it filled in. Eventually, the streetcar gives way to diesel bus service, so even the overhead wires are cut back. This is 1954-ish or so. Actually, it's a little bit later than that. This is more like 1958 or so. The buses, trackless trolleys were dropped from the two-lane line, and it's just the line just used diesel buses at this point. You can see one of those diesel buses there heading under the underpass for the train. That's another Kansas City Southern train. We actually know that this one, because of the black cars with the black with yellow trim and red, red highlights. That is the Kansas City Southern big name train that was called the Southern Belle, and it left here in New Orleans and then headed from New Orleans all the way to Kansas City, Missouri. So that brings us to our most modern, well, again, another 1964 picture of the riverside of the Carrollton intersection, which now we start seeing the beginning of what becomes known as the Carrollton interchange, because now this is 1964. The retail on the other side of the intersection still physically looks the same, even though the the MB is, as you saw in the other 1964 picture, is now the MB is of course now a budget store, but it's still there. That's the big overpass on the right hand side that was always there. You can see there is a bus that's crossing over the bus there. That's one of the airline buses going. It's the airline bus going out to the airport, basically coming over, and that will lead over crossing. Once you cross the overpass, Tulane Avenue is no longer. It becomes Airline Highway and goes from there. That millwork, that lumber yard building, giant, looks like a giant Quonset, military build style building, is still there. You see it's used as a lumber yard, but you can see it's closing down. That purpose is closing down, and the building itself at this time is for sale. The garage is no longer a Ford garage, but a Chevy garage. It's still there to this day as I can't remember the name of the company, but it's collision. It's a body shop, but it's not tied to a dealer. It's a third party independent body shop. The Carrollton interchange there, you could see the Punch Train Expressway is all overhead at this point because of the combination of the train tracks and the intersections and everything else. This is the beginning of all of that. The This is the Punch Train Expressway at this point. Later in the 19 in the late 19 in the 1980s, of course, what is that overpass in the middle of the photo? It becomes Interstate 10, and US 90 Business and Interstate 10, and that's when the interchange gets even bigger because I-10, then the city, well, the government in the city builds an even higher overpass over the airline highway overpass at the interchange, and that's of course what we have now. So Tulane and Carrollton has been an important connector, an important nexus for the city of New Orleans for generations. And like I say, couldn't break it down and talk about all of this in just one picture. So I hope you enjoyed, seeing some of, let's get away from the downtown stuff and start talking about the connectors to the suburbs here. By the way, just a quick side note on this. This is our last photo of the pod. The big building in the background, top of frame left, that's Mid City Baptist Church, which of course later moves down the street and it's a different congregation there now. The big building on the right, that's the four-story. That's actually Jesuit High School. It's a weird angle. It's the side. That's the Bank Street side of the building because of the way Carrollton Avenue curves around at that point. Once again, I am your NOLA history guy, nolahistoryguy.com, patreon.com/ all one word, NOLA history guy. Come support us. Come give us some feedback. Tell us what you want to hear on the pod. Sign up and we'll listen to you even more if you're a premium pod member, of course, if you're a supporter of us. We love all you guys, though. We'll keep talking to you even if you don't, even if you don't join the Patreon. Of course, I'm kind of being facetious on that. Uh, at NOLA History Guy on all social media. Pleasure as always. Shout out to the folks who created this parchment PowerPoint template that I just love to use. It's licensed under Creative Commons. Share alike if you like it and you want to. You're willing to adhere to the share alike license. Ping me. I'll send you the template. Be more than happy to.